Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Dr. Mike Miltic. I am chairman of the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, which goes by the acronym CRTPO, which is pronounced CARPO. Welcome everyone to this kickoff meeting for the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, also known as the MTP. We're here today to start the community conversation about how our transportation network should look in 2050. As we've seen this past year with COVID-19, we really need to be prepared to adapt to emerging trends and new technologies. So I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items first, and then share a video to kick off today's event. After the video, I'll have a brief conversation with several CRTPO staff members to set the framework for the panel discussion, which features several transportation leaders in the region and the state. Most of us attended a few virtual meetings and webinars at this point, but just as a reminder, please submit questions for the panelists through the Q&A function. Staff will share some links and fun facts in the chat box throughout the meeting, so keep an eye out for that. You can change the view of your screen using the control in the top right-hand corner of your window. And as always, let's please be respectful of one another. And now time for the video. Theo, the video, please. Theo, the video.
What will our transportation system look like in 2050? New and emerging technologies, like self-driving vehicles and connected vehicles, are expanding mobility options and starting to change how we travel. With so much going on in our everyday lives, thinking about the future may seem difficult. But to get to the future we want, we must start planning and preparing today. Recent world events show us how important it is to be ready for change and to plan and be prepared for shifting trends and realities. The Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, or CRTPO, is spearheading this effort in the Charlotte region of Iredell, Mecklenburg, and Union counties. This is accomplished through an update of its Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP.
The MTP is a plan that documents the vision for our future and establishes the objectives, goals, and transportation priorities through 2050 to help us realize that vision. The plan considers all modes of transportation, while also considering the impacts to the environment, the economy, public health, and the overall quality of life for everyone.
The plan identifies funding for these projects, as well as prioritizing how that funding is spent.
We need your help to establish a vision for our future transportation system, to identify needed projects, and to hold us accountable for monitoring our progress.
We need your help to establish a vision for our future transportation system, to identify the projects that are necessary, and to hold us accountable to ensure that we're meeting our goals and objectives for this plan.
There are opportunities to provide input throughout the development of the MTP. Please visit our website to learn all the ways you can share input with us. We can't wait to hear from you.
Goals and objectives provide a framework for the region's transportation strategies and priorities, and guide development of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Effective goals and objectives are measurable, so we can monitor if we're moving in the right direction. When developing goals and objectives, it's important to understand what people who live and work in our region want.
As a working mother, having a reliable commute would be a huge benefit. Less time in traffic would mean more quality time with my family.
I'd love to ride to work, where I buy my groceries and other amenities, or even a park or greenway in our community.
I rely on transit because I don't have a car, but it doesn't always go the places I need it to go, and it's not always on time, so I spend a long time waiting.
Making roadway improvements so I can make deliveries on time would be a huge benefit, not only for me, but for the people I serve.
Do these priorities align with your vision? Are there priorities that we haven't included? And what projects accomplish the goals and objectives that are most important to you?
We're here to listen to you. We want to make your participation as convenient and safe as possible. We're developing web and virtual technologies for public engagement. Visit our website to review and comment on draft goals and objectives, explore potential projects, and comment on the ones that matter to you.
Thank you, Theo. I wanted to start with that video because I think it does a great job of laying out what the Metropolitan Transportation Plan is and provides some real-life examples of how it can help create the transportation network for all of us. I'd like to ask some of the CRTPO staff to join me at this point so we can provide a little bit more information about CRTPO and the MTP before we move into today's headline event. Bob, Catherine, Judy, can you all turn on your cameras? Very good. All right, Bob, you're the Assistant Director at CRTPO. Would you kick off our conversation by telling us more about the CRTPO organization? What is it? What does it accomplish? And also, who does CRTPO serve?
Certainly. Thanks, Dr. Mike. I appreciate it. The CRTPO is the federally designated metropolitan planning organization for the Charlotte urbanized area, and is responsible for long-range transportation planning in the region. The federal government requires the establishment and operation of our organization in order for the region to receive federal transportation funds, and we're also responsible for ensuring that those funds are allocated and spent properly. The objective for all our planning efforts is to create a more comprehensive and efficient transportation system that will improve both quality of life and economic outcomes for all our residents. And our plans address all modes of transportation, including cars, transit, bicycles, and pedestrians. In terms of who we serve, our federally mandated planning area incorporates all of Iredell and all of Mecklenburg counties, as well as the urbanized area of Union County. So we serve the residents, businesses, and the municipalities within this 3-county planning area. And our goal is to be inclusive and ensure all residents are represented in the planning process. I'd like to mention here that CRTPO's planning processes really depend on collaboration from member jurisdictions, staff, regional partners, and elected officials. For example, staff from the jurisdictions and partners such as NCDOT serve on the Technical Coordinating Committee. This committee is responsible for reviewing proposed policies and providing technical comments as well as recommendations to the board. The CRTPO board is comprised of elected officials from the jurisdictions and is the decision-making body that ensures that the transportation policies are enacted throughout the region.
Thank you, Bob. That's very helpful in understanding what CRTPO is and does. Next, let's briefly talk about how the tremendous growth of our region has and will continue to influence this organization.
As a federally mandated MPO, our planning area boundary is informed by the urbanized area, and the urbanized area is determined after each decennial census. This means that as the region's population has grown, so has the CRTPO's planning area. As you can see from the map on the screen, the planning area encompassed primarily Mecklenburg County through the 1980s, but as population growth picked up in Union and Iredell counties throughout the 90s and the 2000s, our planning area boundary expanded accordingly. Currently, the planning area contains approximately 1.4 million residents, making it the largest of North Carolina's 18 metropolitan planning organizations.
So CRTPO is the largest MPO in North Carolina. That's impressive. Thank you, Bob. Okay, let's talk in more detail about the MTP. I know the second half of today's webinar will feature a robust conversation about the importance of the plan and its role in anticipating and planning for future needs. However, I think some of the audience might still like to know a little bit more detail about how the plan is developed and what it includes. Catherine, the video explained that the MTP establishes the vision, goals, objectives, and transportation priorities for the next 20 years. Can you please explain in more detail?
Sure. So a little bit more detail about what the MTP plan does. It's really helpful to know that CRTPO manages and updates 3 long-range plans on an ongoing basis with its partners. And it's helpful to have a little context about each of those plans to better understand what the MTP does. First, we have a comprehensive transportation plan that envisions our future improvements for all modes over the next 50 years. This is really a system-wide needs assessment that's updated on an ongoing basis. Next, we have the MTP, and that prioritizes the CTP's big ideas and recommends a set of projects for the next 20 plus years. The projects prioritized in the MTP must be fiscally constrained, which means there must be enough funds to implement the projects within a set time frame. The MTP is updated every 4 years, and this frequency allows the region to respond to changing conditions and adjust its priorities over the next 20 years if needed. Finally, there's the Transportation Improvement Program, which implements the projects in the MTP. This is a program of funded multimodal transportation projects that CRTPO and NCDOT intend to deliver over the next 10 years. So hopefully that context provides a little bit more understanding of the MTP's role.
All right, so the MTP prioritizes the region needs, which means if you want a project completed one day, you really need to advocate for it to be included into the MTP. So how does the average person make sure their project is included in the 2050 MTP?
Sure. So Judy's going to talk a little bit later about the specific tools available for residents to advocate for their projects. But I'm going to provide a little overview of the process, the entire planning process, so that people understand when and where they can participate to influence the outcomes. As most of us know, every planning process starts off with establishing a vision, developing goals and objectives. So in the case of the MTP, we're really trying to think about what our transportation network should be in the next 20 years, and then defining goals that will help realize that vision. You can see here on the screen, these are the draft goals that we've developed so far based on the input that's been received. We're essentially trying to create a safe and sustainable, integrated and efficient multimodal transportation system. We want a network that improves the quality of life for residents and improves our economic competitiveness. And we also want to create equitable options for getting around and collaborate with our partners. These goals really do help inform the decisions that are made later in the planning process. So it's super important for the community to weigh in on the draft goals and objectives. Again, Judy will talk a little bit more about how to do that next, but just remember that the opportunity to provide input closes on December 31st. Next in the process, after we define our vision and goals, staff is going to develop roadway and non-roadway revenue assumptions. Remember, this plan must be fiscally constrained. Next slide, please. So staff has to work with partners such as Charlotte Area Transit and different agencies to develop revenue projections. This slide here illustrates some of the factors that are evaluated for the roadway assumptions. You can see that we're evaluating things such as funding forecasts based on population growth, maintenance costs, and taking into consideration the number of dollars that are already allocated in the current STIP. I wish we had more time to talk about this in detail today, but if you want to know about the roadway revenue available for the 2050 MTP, please watch the November CRTPO board meeting. Curtis just dropped a link in the chat. That video is available on Facebook. RSNH has done a great job walking us through just the understanding of what's available. So I would direct everyone to there if they'd like to learn more. After we develop the revenue assumptions, there's a call for candidate projects. And this is the next big opportunity for residents to weigh in on the process. Again, Judy's going to talk about the actual tool that's available, but this is an opportunity for residents to tell us which projects they think are important and should be considered for including in the MTP. It's really important to note that projects must be included in the comprehensive transportation plan or that system-wide needs assessment in order to be eligible. So the online tool that's available right now takes the guessing work out of it and lets you know what's available for you to weigh in on. Next in the process is the project prioritization. The projects that are chosen to be scored are scored using data-driven methodologies. Next slide, please. So thank you there. And again, we don't have a lot of time to dig into the details, but just know that there's ranking methodologies for both roadway and non-roadway projects. This slide here shows a summary of the roadway ranking methodology, which is a quantitative process divided into two tiers. The first tier scores projects based on their need, and then the second tier looks at the sustainability of a project. So ultimately, the projects with the highest scores are best for realizing our vision, and they're selected in a descending order until project funds are allocated or accounted for. Because remember, this plan has to be fiscally constrained. The last step in the planning process is the third opportunity to weigh in and provide your input. This is essentially the opportunity for all stakeholders, including residents, resource agencies, and partners, to review the draft list and raise any kind of outstanding issues. Once the third public comment window closes, the plan will be brought before the CRTPO board for adoption. And that's basically a quick overview of the process, but more importantly, the points at which residents should plug in and provide their input.
Thanks, Catherine. It sounds like the results of the MTP planning process are driven by a collaboration with residents, businesses, and elected officials, but is also driven by data and finances. I know your team will walk us through the more technical side of things later in the planning process. So let me now turn to Judy to talk about how the collaborative side is done with stakeholders. Judy, can you tell us how the planning process will collaborate with the various stakeholders in the three-county area?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Miltic. One of the main responsibilities of our work as an MPO is to ensure the public has an opportunity to provide input on transportation plans for the region. Not only do we work with our 20-member jurisdictions, but with the community as well. We're taking a multi-pronged approach to try and collaborate with all stakeholders throughout the process. Catherine just talked about the MTP goals and objectives, as well as priority projects. In mid-November, we launched the first survey for the planning process to collect the stakeholder input on the plan goals and objectives. Remember, this is a really influential stage because the goals and objectives truly guide the rest of the planning process. So I encourage everyone to visit the project website, which I'll talk more about in just a minute, and complete the survey. The survey is scheduled to close on December 31st. In addition to the online survey, we're planning on using other online tools to interact with stakeholders throughout the process. Right now, we have an interactive map to collect candidate projects for the MTP. Stakeholders can visit this tool and nominate projects from the CTP or from the 2045 MTP to be evaluated in the 2050 ranking process. All surveys and tools can be accessed from the project website, which is 2050mtp.org. Since the CRTPO planning area's demographics have changed as the region has grown, we know we need to provide materials in several languages. Therefore, part of our engagement efforts include a hotline with messages in 10 languages, so we can receive input from anyone and everyone. A lot of our written materials will be provided in both English and Spanish for the 2050 MTP update. We also know that the previous format of public meetings, with a project manager explaining the project auditorium style, is no longer the best way to reach people. In addition to the project website and online tools, we've become more active on social media. And now, with the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, we don't have much choice but to hold the majority of our current outreach virtually. We're happy to provide information or give a short presentation at any of your neighborhood, business, or organization's virtual meetings. In addition to completing the goals and objectives survey and submitting candidate projects, we encourage you to sign up for updates and project information on the project website, which is again, 2050mtp.org. You can also share comments and questions with us, and please follow us on our Facebook and Twitter accounts as well. We will employ these various engagement tools throughout each step of the process. You can expect several virtual events like this, regular website updates, and surveys as needed to collect input from the community. Your collaboration in sharing information and encouraging participation from others is vital to the success of the 2050 MTP planning process. We think this range of tools, combined with frequent partnering with the community throughout the process, will allow us to effectively collaborate and ultimately develop this important plan together.
Very good. Well, thank you all for your time today and helping set the framework for the next conversation. I'd like to now turn things over to Geraldine Gardner. She is the Executive Director of the Central Carolina Regional Council and has graciously agreed to facilitate today's panel discussion. Here you go, Geraldine.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miltich. It's really an honor to moderate this panel of leaders and experts that I'm about to introduce, and I'd love for our panelists to turn their cameras on and join me virtually. As you all know, and as we've just heard, the scope and importance of the MTP is really quite profound for our region, and there's certainly lots for us to talk about this afternoon. I have a few questions that I'm going to lead off with, but as Dr. Miltich reminded everyone, please use the Q&A feature to send us your questions, and I'll be weaving those into the conversation as we go. So now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Delighted to introduce you to them. First is David Howard. He is the Chief Deputy Secretary at the NC Department of Transportation. David is also a former Charlotte City Council member and also former representative to the CRTPO board. So he's very familiar with this process and this organization. Next up is Tony Lathrop. He is a member of the NC Board of Transportation and chair of the Funding Appropriation Strategies Committee. Welcome, Tony. Delighted to have here with us Jen Boster. She is the president and CEO of the Iredell County Economic Development Corporation. And last, but certainly not least, we have Eric Zavril. He is the Bike and Walk Program Coordinator at Sustain Charlotte. Now, hopefully, all of you had a chance to see that their wonderful and impressive bios are now in the chat, and I hope you'll take a moment to read through them. But in the interest of time, we're really going to just dive right in to our conversation. So I'm going to start with a few opening questions for our panelists. And this first question, I'd like Eric and Tony to sink their teeth into. So here it is. We just heard that the MTP planning process asks us to look 30 years into the future. And knowing how unpredictable the last 12 months was, and how unpredictable and uncertain the future of mobility may be, I'd love to know from both of you what you believe some of the values or approaches that we should use to guide this planning process. So Eric, let's start with you. What do you think? Values and approaches, knowing how uncertain the future may be.
Thank you, Geraldine, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I don't mind going last. My last name is Aziz. I'm used to being at the end of the line. But yeah, 2020 has taught us it's really difficult to predict the future. But I think we should use history as a guide, and doing that, some values become timeless. So I think efficiency, smart growth, using both of those approaches in a human-centric way, designing places and taking into account the human scale, I think would be some of the items that we should really think about incorporating in the whole process. Smart growth uses land use and transportation, bringing those together, to make the most of things. And if resources, as we see, are going to become, I think, scarcer in the future. So efficiency is going to be very key to bringing all those together.
Great, Eric. That's a great start. Tony, what's your perspective?
Thanks, Geraldine. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. I wanted to, I guess I have a couple of process points and a substantive point. From a process point, I think it's a timeless value to to always work together in a process that's inclusive and rigorous and transparent so that we can have consensus as much as possible, rather than being a elected official who might just read in the paper about some important thing that they're supposed to be involved in. Rather, include folks from the beginning. And secondly, from a process standpoint, to build relationships so that we know each other well and trust each other, so that it's not just transactional. It's not just when I need you to do something or to support something. I already know you and we already have a relationship, so we can work together better. And on the substance of it, I think that we need to educate each other about the forces and the principles that are sort of behind the why of that we're doing this. The fact that we need to work for economic opportunity, economic development, and for desirable outcomes like livability and sustainability and competitiveness of our whole region as a place to live and work and raise a family, so that we can adapt to these disruptions that are coming in the form of new technologies and for example, autonomous vehicles and such. Thanks.
Thanks, Tony. Those are great points from both of you. Efficiency, being human-centered, focused on transparency and inclusion. And I think we heard about some alignment with those values in the presentation from staff. But let's turn to the goals that were just presented, the goals for this process, and bring David and Jen into the conversation. So we heard that improving quality of life is just such a fundamental goal of this plan. So I'd love to hear from you about how you see quality of life in the region improving because of this plan. What are some of the hopes that you have from this planning process based on where you sit and what you do? So Jen, I want to start with you. What's your perspective on this question?
Yes, thanks. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. So I think, quality of life is a key ingredient for economic development. In order for companies to be successful, they need to have access to workers. And so the reason people move to a community is because of the quality of life and the quality of place of that community. They emphasize when they look at a community, safety, equity, ability to cost of what it costs to live. And so, I think this plan is important because it's looking at how to create safe, efficient, and sustainable transportation modes. We need to have mobility choices that our local community can prioritize, not just our roads, but non-traditional transportation modes like greenways and bike paths that directly impact our quality of life. We want to be a community that people want to live in. Equity, we need to look at how to bring transportation options to residents and workers and connecting them with employers while eliminating congestion. Not all people can afford to live anywhere, nor do all people have access to a car. And then there are elements of childcare and how you get your child from your home to childcare and childcare to work. And so the commute is important. And the further out that we get from the center in places in more rural communities, the more challenging that is. So thinking about the whole region and where those work centers are and that commute pattern for all people to be able to access opportunity and be able to make that commute work for them. I also think it's important because we have to think about our communities as one community, not our county borders. You know, our transportation issues don't stop where our geography is. So we need to think about the impacts that growth is going to have, both in terms of our community, but beyond. And whether that's residential, whether that's commercial and industrial, and how our regional road systems are going to be impacted. Most importantly, I think that transportation is a long-term planning process. And if we don't anticipate the needs and issues now to be addressed, we may not be prepared when all of that growth happens. You know, prices go up, land goes up, land use is developed by each community, and they're feeders into other places. And so it's so important that we as a community of communities think through, you know, how do we anticipate the needs of what we want our community to look like and continue to keep it attractive, not just today, but as we grow and see that growth happen.
Thanks, Jen. A lot of great points in there. David, what's your perspective? What are you hoping to get out of this planning process for our region in terms of improving quality of life?
Jen just read from my notes, so I don't have a lot to add to that. Great job, Jen. The only thing that I'll add that maybe you didn't touch on, but just hone in just a little bit more on is certainty. The one thing that I know now from having spent time in other cities, Raleigh and DC, and having a chance to kind of do some travel in those jobs, is that one thing that makes Charlotte a little different is that we have robust planning activities, and we try to stick to our plans. You know, we're known for that across the country. That's why, you know, it's always competitive who's going to be the planning directors in these jobs in our region, because they know that, you know, not only are we serious about planning, but we try really hard to stick to those plans. And as Tony and I both know from my time on the Planning Commission, whenever we try to go away from those plans, there's a fight because we really want them to mean something. So, you know, what does certainty mean? Certainty for a business means that they know that when you say that you're going to put an investment into infrastructure in a certain direction, a certain road, a certain, you know, if you're going to expand it, if you're really going to commit to a light rail program, you know, they can count on that. They can know that that there's not going to be a lot that's going to pull you off of that plan. For a family, that means that when I pick where to invest in a house or a condo or a townhouse, you know, that means something, because the plans that I looked at, you know, told me that the intentions of this municipality is for this, you know, land down the street to be this, or for it to be that. It helps me with understanding kind of where the job opportunities are going to be. So certainty is one of those things that I hope that will come from this. And it, you know, this plan will follow a long line of plans that have kind of set the goals for where our region has gone. So for me, you know, when you have clear vision and when you have certainty, that lends to quality of life. The only other thing I add too is that, you know, given some of my work in Raleigh and in DC, you know, one of the things that I learned from working with Secretary Fox in DC is that, you know, when you talk about equity, you know, transportation at its very heart is at the very heart of what we do is about equity. If we ever forget that what we're doing is providing people access to jobs, providing people access to healthcare, providing people access to things that improve their lives, then we miss the whole point of what we're doing. It's not just how wide it is. It's not whether or not it meets, you know, the folks that are familiar with the AASHTO Green Book. It's not whether or not it meets all of those criteria. It's whether or not it provides access for people to improve their quality of life. And at the heart of this plan, that has to be what we're doing when we're talking about where future investments will go.
Yeah, that's a great point, David. Appreciate that. And I think between all four responses, you guys really laid out a lot of hope for this planning process and what it could deliver.
No
but
pressure.
Let's dive into no pressure, right? I think
No
the
pressure,
staff and the team is ready. But let's dive into a little bit more as a group, some discussion around, you know, from where you sit. We can talk about challenges all day, but I think a really key to getting a good quality planning process is getting our arms around, well, what are we trying to solve for? What are those pain points that our residents and our business owners and our students and workers are experiencing on a day-to-day basis? And certainly the survey that's a part of this process will be key to that. But from where you all sit, the four of you, just popcorn out to me some key challenges that you see in our CRTPO region. What comes to mind that this planning process can solve for?
Well, I'll jump in first. Jen actually alluded to it a while ago, and the word that I think you said, Jen, and if you didn't, I know it's what you were trying to say, is togetherness. If we don't pull together, I mean, I wrote this down, the region will rise or fail together, period. I mean, that ought to be kind of the mantra going forward. And we've seen this play out time and time again across the country. Whether you look at Atlanta, who became Sprawl City, and I'm sorry if there's anybody on here from Atlanta, I'm not trying to get in trouble with you guys. Or if you look at Denver, they got really serious about using mass transit as a way to organize their growth and to pull people together. If you look at some of these areas, there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from it. And the cities and the regions that actually came together got it right. And the cities that didn't just saw sprawl take over. And that's what, contributed to the quality of life and them spending so much time in their cars. So, I mean, I'm going to say that, togetherness is one of those things we need to start off with, understanding that, again, either we do it right together or we'll fail together.
I'm going to come back to that, but that's a really great point.
I'll jump in.
I think to jump in. Yeah.
That's spot on. And I couldn't agree more with that. And I would say that a related challenge, and the reason we have to pull together, is for folks, I'm going to be a bit of a broken record on economic opportunity, economic mobility as a challenge for our region, because that is such a huge challenge, and why we need to collaborate, because folks have to be able to get to where they work, to where they get their education, to where they get their health care, and they're not worried about whether they're crossing the Mecklenburg-Iredell County line or the MPO. I'm going to talk about other MPOs, the Gaston Cleveland MPO line, which is the river with us, or my NC DOT division lines. Folks just have to get to where they need to get in this region for their economic opportunity. And that's the ball we need to keep our eye on as we collaborate in this process.
Great points.
So I'm going to echo everything everyone said, collaboration. So it's interesting being in Iredell County. We actually have two labor markets. We're part of two labor markets. We're part of the Charlotte regional labor market. But in a sense, we have our own labor market because we have 9 counties that surround us. And we have a 50% of people that leave our community and 50% of the people that come in. So when you think about it, this is important to us, but so are all of those other communities. Because they consist of a labor market that's important to our industry. And so, I think that it's really important that we collaborate and think through all the various plans and the public input that has been put into those plans so that we can use those as our fundamental building blocks to think about the connectivity between the plans and the long-term range thinking of how to solve our transportation goals and mobility goals. Again, I think equity should be at the center of all of this because it really is about giving people opportunity to childcare, to healthcare, to work, to a quality of life that allows them to flourish. And so I agree with the other panelists that it's collaboration and equity kind of, to me, are the cornerstones around how we need to think about this.
Only thing I could really add is just recognizing some of the, you started off about talking about challenges, and of course, working together solves, we could tackle those challenges a lot easier. But I think, recognizing this different cultural and physical, paradigms that are currently in place, and, for Charlotte, it's auto-centric. We have to change that culture. That's going to be a huge challenge as we face opening up transportation choice, and really being honest with that, and trying to work to overcome that. But in the process, we could really show people how that impacts the region. The more transportation choices in Charlotte provide more road space for the folks who are traveling other places that have no choice but to travel, like the workforce and trucking and shipping, and we've seen how important that has been over this last year to get those goods to where they need to be, to supply the basic needs and necessities for folks. So I think just, focusing on how we work together to overcome that auto-centric culture and mindset, and really put a dent in it and open up the transportation choices, not just for Charlotte, but also open those up into the region.
Hey, Geraldine, before you leave that one too, before you leave that, I'll just some numbers to cement what everybody just talked about. I love this commuter, the map of our region. According to the Charlotte Business Alliance, the Charlotte Region Business Alliance, 36,000 people come in from Union County, 9,300 people come in from Iredell County. It just reiterates to me that this region is codependent on each other. Mecklenburg needs the workforce, and those other counties depend on Mecklenburg for jobs and for amenities and a lot of other things. And just going around the clock, 21,000 come in from Gaston, 8,500 from Lincolnton. Barris is 28,000, and York is 33. So, I mean, we're all very codependent on each other. So again, it's very important for us to work together.
Those are great points. And I'm going to push you, panel, a little bit on this theme of collaboration, because I think collaboration is a real easy word to throw out, right?
Easy to say.
And real easy to say. And I came to this region just 2 years ago from Washington, D.C., and I'm a planner by background. And when I joined Central Lina, and I talked to our planning director, and she started telling me that we have 3 MPOs and a rural planning organization within the boundaries of Central Lina's 9-county region, which is a lot of coordination and collaboration. That's a lot of relationship building to get things done in a way that's going to benefit everyone. So we're going to hear later, before we leave the session today, about all the other planning activities that are happening in the region. And by region, I'm not just talking about CRTPO, but the bigger region, Connect Beyond, Beyond 77, and on and on and on. So panel, how do we make collaboration concrete through this MTP process? What does that look like? What are some concrete things that the team can do, that the community can do, that our elected officials can do to really make collaboration stick through this process?
Okay, I'm trying not to be the
and you
guy
win the $1 million prize if you get the answer correct, because it's a tough one.
I'm gonna tell you a quick anecdotal story real quick. So I was the representative for the city council on Mumpo at the time when we were trying to figure out what to do with our new MSA. Bob, you remember this well. And it was coming off the heels of some issues with our airport and some other things. So Charlotte had their heels dug in about kind of the way things would go. And I was Mr. Regional. I was going to meetings at the lake. I was kind of all over the place. But when we brought in some of our friends from Iredell, I'll just be honest with you, Jen, they came in kind of, guns a-blazing about a lot of things and the way that things had gone, because they were the new guys to the table. And what comes to mind, Geraldine, is that we had to learn to respect each other in what our thoughts and what our needs were. And it was interesting. I mean, you know, for months we went back and forth about things and educating ourselves on the way the MPO was set up and the way it worked. And in the end, this is the anecdotal story. When we came down to what the name of it would be, naming it Carpo. I mean, we had a long list of names, and I just assumed after months that Charlotte would never be in the name. I was ready for Michelina. I was making up all kind of names because I thought that was going to have to be one of the things that we gave on. And it was actually my friends from Iredale that said, no, Charlotte has to be in the name. And it threw me off. I don't understand what you guys are saying to me after months of this. And they say, oh, no, we understand that Charlotte's important to us. We just don't want Charlotte to tell us what to do. We want it to be collaborative. And it really took a whole process for me to understand that they understood how important we were. And we didn't have to tell you how important we were. They wanted to know that we valued them too. So actually the name Carpo came from Iredale County. It didn't come from Charlotte. So, you know, that was a sign to me that everybody understood our importance. We just needed to figure out how to respect each other's needs. What they didn't want is all of the money from NPO to only come into Charlotte. I mean, that was point blank what they cared about. And I think over the last 2 years, Iredale can tell you that's not the way that things have gone. So it's kind of probably respect. I hate to keep using these broad words, but respect is at the heart of beginning that conversation for sure, because there is mutual agreement that we're all dependent on each other. Am I wrong on that, Jen?
No, I think that's very accurate. Yeah.
So Iredale named the NPO. Charlotte did not. Just so you know the history of that one.
Well, it just reinforces those formal and informal channels of building relationships, right? And that they have to endure beyond just the planning process. Any other, Tony, Eric, Jen, something real concrete that we can do, not musings about collaboration?
I like the theory of having like a city, having one plan and not a bunch of plans that are siloed, and because that, I think what David just talked about, that collaboration piece, when you go off in your corner and you're working, and then it's usually one team comes over and tries to say, well, this is what we came up with and we're going to go with this. Folks don't like to be told what to do or what the plan is, right? They want to be working on a plan together collaboratively. So if there is one regional plan and it, each, Charlotte and the other cities, their plans plug into that, but, they're not worked to, in isolation. They're collaboratively working together on one plan regionally, and then, the same thing in their cities that go cohesively. I think that will help build some of those informal and formal, but making it formal, I think, is the first key in the planning process there.
And I was going to say a variation of the same thing, so I'll just build on it a bit. And that, as a concrete thing, is beyond just a musing of that collaboration, that the leaders, both the staff leaders and the other leaders of these various efforts, the Connect Beyond, the Beyond 77, the Charlotte Moves, etc. They need, it's a function of their leadership that they actually have to get together with each other and have these conversations, and on a regular basis, about how can we do this together? Where's the mutually beneficial points in what we're working on that we can share together? So I'm Division 10 DOT. I'm not going to go work on my stuff for 10 months and then call you up, Geraldine, and say, can I come see you? Here's what I've had in my desk drawer for 10 months. It's the first time you've seen it. What do you think? To me, that's a very transactional approach, and it needs to be much more collaborative and relationship oriented.
Great. Appreciate that. Appreciate those suggestions. I think we're all definitely listening, and we'll take those into account as we move forward. I want to shift our conversation a little bit to the elephant in the room, COVID-19. A lot of trends, a lot of, looking in the crystal ball, thinking about how COVID is going to impact us short and long term. And I'd just love to hear from you all in terms of maybe the top positive, if I can get a positive trend from you, or if you have to go there, a negative trend that you're seeing from COVID that's going to impact mobility and we should have in our minds as we're going through this planning process.
I'll start. I think a positive trend that we're seeing in the Charlotte region is the Charlotte market is a hot place to live and work. So we're ranked among the top 10 locations in the United States for people wanting to move. Housing is experiencing a big boom right now, and we're going to continue to see a growth in population, which again, from an economic development standpoint, talent equals corporate interest. In terms of investment on the corporate side, North Carolina is a great place for companies to locate. We're a top location by site selectors. Charlotte specifically is a premier location for corporate headquarters and advanced manufacturing, and we have a diversity of industries here. COVID has had a significant impact on the supply chain and distribution networks. And a lot of our companies are looking at reshoring opportunities. They're looking at consolidating and centralizing their manufacturing and distribution networks to be in closer proximity. So in terms of the companies that we have here, we're seeing a lot of that activity right now. And I think we're going to continue to see that because the Charlotte region has a robust transportation infrastructure network. We're attractive because we're in the Southeast region. We've had a history of attracting industrial sectors supported by the corporate community. I think that from a transportation challenge, with growth comes challenges, and especially with transportation. And again, from an Iredell perspective, we're landlocked with a lake, which is a positive thing and not a positive thing. I mean, you can only move people certain ways. And I think that, as we grow with industrial users, manufacturers, distribution, and those folks want to be more regional, I think we're going to see more activity on our side roads, which aren't necessarily set up for both residents and freight, to be honest. And then from 77 down, that's kind of the thoroughfare. And, we've made some improvements there with, controversially with the toll road. But it's going to continue to be something that we're going to have to stay ahead of, to think through how do we get both residents around our community and our industrial freight around our community so that we can continue to maintain that quality of life and we're not, so constricted in terms of people moving around and mobility. So that's what I see.
And I'm just gonna try to bring in Eric here because I think what Jen just said reinforced the point that you had earlier, which is, if we can get people off the road, that frees up some capacity for freight. But what do you see in your bike ped world? I'm hoping for something positive. Will you give me something positive, Eric?
I will give you an early Christmas gift. Yes, it is something positive. We saw huge numbers of folks getting out walking and especially biking. I think bike shop owners, especially April through all the summer, warm months, they couldn't put bikes together fast enough. It looked like Christmas every day for them, putting them and selling on the bikes. So I think that was a great opportunity to get folks out and exposed to maybe biking and walking more than they've ever done before. So we even did some open streets in Charlotte, closing down streets through traffic and opening them up for folks to walk and bike more. So I think that's definitely bright side in the whole thing. And I know folks are worried about teleworking and commuting staying really high. But I'll break out some numbers, David. I'll be brief. It's my turn to give some statistics. But, the high back in May nationwide was 35% people working from home. It's dropped in November down to 22%. I think that once we get, the vaccines distributed, those numbers will fall back down. They may never go back to 3 to 4%. But I think, you can look at South End these last couple months and at times you would never notice there was a pandemic going on at all, people being out. So I think it's hard to keep folks inside, and I think we'll see those levels returning back.
Yeah. I want to go to a couple questions from the audience, and David, I'm posing these to you, sort of two questions, very similar and related. How do we get people to buy into other modes of transportation, whether that's walking or biking, kind of get out of their cars? And related to that, how do we change the narrative around who takes the bus and make it more positive and affirming that if you take transit, that's actually a mode of choice instead of a mode of last resort? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the first thing is that I think it's all about how we do our land use planning. And that has to go beyond on your first question about, how do we get people to use other modes? As long as I joke with my dad who lives in Atlanta, it takes 20 minutes to go to the grocery store down the road. It takes 20 minutes to do everything in Atlanta. So as long as you got to get in the car and it takes that long, people are going to always be dependent on the car. I like what we're doing along the rail line, which is, making it mixed use. And the thing we haven't figured out is how to make it mixed income. So we got to figure that part out. But as we can do both of those and we push that density where the infrastructure is, which is what that whole corridor plan is, the 5 corridors plan is that we've had for years, I think you'll start to see people use the mode, not out of convenience, but out of actual, you want to help the people that have to use it out of necessity and not just the people that can use it out of convenience, which is what we're doing right now. So we need to do a better job with that. But the more we can make communities denser, where people can actually have the infrastructure in place to ride a bike or walk, I think that helps. So that's land use planning. That's what we have to do as leaders. From the standpoint of the second part of your question was about equity.
About bus. How do you make bus a mode of choice and take the stigma off of bus transportation?
I'm not exactly sure. If I knew that one, I probably would have gotten named the Secretary of Transportation yesterday. I'm joking, in DC. But I'm saying the real key to that one probably is making sure that our system is more than just one thing. It shouldn't just be buses. It should be rail. It should be bike. I mean, when we really figure out how to make somebody's trip inclusive so that they can use a scooter to get through part of it, bike share to get through another, bus to get you to the rest of it. And all of it is codependent on each other so people can do it as fast as they can. I think what we'll do is we'll start to see people use it in a way that is most efficient. And right now, the real problem with our bus system is not efficient. It goes into one point and goes out of one point. So if we could start to make, for instance, our transit stops more of a spoke and wheel approach, so that you're going out and forth from, Tavola Station and back in, and not going from way out in Tavola, wherever you are, all the way into downtown to get a connector. We got to do a better job. And I think CATS is working on trying to make it a more efficient ride and using technology to help people go from point A to point B, no matter what the mode is.
Awesome. Thank you, David. So we're going to close out our conversation with a quick lightning round. Very short answers. Tony, big, bold, visionary idea that the 2050 plan should explore.
My bold vision is for the whole region to have a fully integrated, multimodal, visually understandable model system so that as a region, we're all tied together from transit all the way down to biking and walking on a greenway or to the store. Completely integrated so that folks can see how it all works together. Park and ride, the whole 9 yards.
Great. Jen, big, bold idea we should look into for 2050.
So I might be biased, but I think the balance between residential and freight, is there a way to move freight differently than through our highway system? So I don't know what that is, but I think that's going to be a challenge. And so
it's a big one, definitely. Yeah. David and Eric, your closing comment, one reason, the top reason why folks listening on this session today should actively participate in this process. Top reason.
Because if you don't, you have to live with it anyway. So, the point of it is that, you want to be involved with determining how your communities grow and they develop. And there is no bigger investment that you make in a community's development than what you do with its transportation system. And I had a bold one too, but I don't.
Good. Yeah, share away. We'll take a quick second.
Just real quick. Because we have Duke Energy here, we have a great opportunity to be at the forefront of putting up charging stations, to be at be in the lead when it comes to electric cars. We know it's going to happen. Nobody knows when that tipping point will come, but we could be at the forefront of looking for opportunities to do that ourselves and be a place that is progressive enough to say that we are going to do that now and not wait for the industry to come do it for us.
Awesome. Last word, Eric. Bold idea or top reason?
I'll try to be short. Bold idea would be, I think, setting metrics like a regional mode share goal that could be targeted, look a little bit different in different parts of the area, but overall really move the needle for transportation choice in the region. And this area has been growing, and that growth is going to provide opportunities, connections that we've never seen before in this area. So get involved and give your feedback and what exciting possibilities are in store for the future.
Great. Well, thank you, panel. This was really fun. We could talk all afternoon. We're only 3 minutes over, so thanks to those of you for hanging with us. I know there were some questions we didn't get to, but the CRTPO team is going to put them in an FAQ on their website. So I want to turn it back over to Bob Cook to close us out.
All right, Geraldine, thank you very much for leading our effort this afternoon with the panel. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and to lead the discussion. And of course, thanks to the panelists too for participating today. And David, yes, I remember well the boundary expansion after the 2010 census. I think it triggered maybe my PTSD about that time. It was an interesting one. I'm glad you remember it well too. A lot of great food for thought today, and I really appreciate all the input we got from the panel. And I think it will help us a lot as we're preparing the plan this time around. Geraldine, you and the panel talked a lot about collaboration. One of the great things about our region is the desire to make this a better place. And it seems like it's always been the case that there are several regional type initiatives going on at the same time. But right now, I feel like we're in overdrive when it comes to regional planning efforts. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And the slide you're seeing now is evidence of that. And I'm sure there are other current projects that could be added that we just couldn't fit in here. And we are working to coordinate and to collaborate with these initiatives to make sure that the final MTP reflects and builds upon the great work that's being done throughout our planning area. One in particular, of course, is Connect Beyond, that Geraldine, your staff is doing a terrific job on in collaboration with CAT. So These initiatives and others we'll continue to work on to make the plan better this time around. As we close out the hour, I wanted to repeat what Geraldine just said about the unanswered questions in the chat box, or those that came in when people RSVP'd. We will be addressing those in a post on our project website. I don't know if we have a target date for that yet, but I'm hoping we can do it before the end of the year. And lastly, a reminder about the public comment period on our goals and objectives and project priorities. It's open until December 31st. You can use the website to provide your input there as well. And so with that, my thanks to everyone, both on camera and off, who helped make this kickoff a great success. And my thanks also to all of you who took the time to watch and listen today. And so our best wishes to everyone for a happy and healthy holiday season. So good night.